Hey, common scientists, we're coming to you this week with a topic that is near and dear to our hearts or maybe our brains, depending on who you're talking to. And that is the topic of common science. We're going to dive in a little bit about the philosophy of common science, the lifestyle of common science, maybe the community of common scientists, and hopefully it'll give you a better idea of what we're hoping to accomplish every week, of what this journey has looked like for us, and of what we hope this journey could look like for you as a budding common scientist. So I want to toss it to start to Aidan because of us three founders of Common Science, we were joking earlier that he's the foundiest founder because it kind of started with him. So I'd love to hear a little bit about your Common Science beginnings and how we got looped into the mix.
Yeah, so Common Science beginnings, like most millennials, I grew up on Bill Nye the Science Guy, huge fan, science rocks, all those buzzwords, and one thing I'd observed in the last couple of years was just a growing disconnect between science, and I'd been thinking a bit about how that disconnect might be decreased, and I had fortunately connected with Dre. It's funny, we joke if we had to think about who in high school we would have started a podcast with, we would have both been in the bottom 10 maybe of that list,
Yeah.
of each other's lists. And we had been connected though at a family friend, and on my part, his wedding. Shouts out to Carl Rice, and we had a couple beers and connected. And Dre was into sci-fi. I was a science geek as well, and we decided to grab a beer afterwards. It had a few more mandates and philosophized and talked about out there ideas and all of that. And at one point, we had just kind of in passing brought up maybe starting a podcast. And then down the road, we had done nothing about it. But then down the road, I met Lauren, and we had talked about a blog and some of that idea and like popular science ideas. And then, yeah, the Common Science team was merged and founded, and we dove into it during the COVID pandemic. There was ample time at home to get up to side projects like this, and so we dived into it, and it's been a ball for me. I've learned a heck of a lot. How about you guys?
I don't know. I'd say that there was ample time because it was like a nuts period of time, I think. But yeah, I mean, you summed it up quite well. I think originally though, you guys were gonna do like the podcast, and I was going to focus more on the writing, which at the time made so much sense to me right away, like very early on, because I had never listened to a podcast. I was like, oh, that's a dude thing. YouTube, dude thing, podcast, dude thing. And then on hearing Aidan talk about it and like being in the same apartment while conversations were being had, I kept having ideas and like wanting to pop in and wanting to be a part of the conversation. And I don't know how that conversation went between you guys, but I think I and Aidan had just talked about it, and I was like, man, I think I actually really want to be a part of that, and maybe there needs to be more female representation in that space. And then I think you guys had a conversation. This is
Yeah.
way early on, guys, but yeah, it's I'm glad that it turned out how it did.
Yeah, agreed. That is pretty funny. Someone actually earlier today just asked me how everything got started, and I was just like, "Yeah, funny story." And I think it really speaks to really what our kind of MO is as a company, what we are doing as common scientists. It's just we really were just like, "Hey, um, a very unfortunate event, the pandemic, has given us an opportunity to divert a lot of our energy into something that we think is cool. Like we've all talked about writing. Aid and I have talked about a podcast. You had a newfound interest in podcasting. Let's start this sort of common science multimedia company, like where we can kind of get the word out and have great conversations. That Aid and I were just having over beers for, we were just like, hey, let's record these and see if anybody else wants to join the combo. And obviously, you found one lucky lady, or maybe Lucky guy found you. But I think it is really cool because we really just said, hey, let's do it. And there was not a lot of let's prepare, let's do all this, let's do all that. It was just like, all right, we got the name, all right, we got the website, all right, we got this, we got that, all right, we got the no mics, we're on Zoom,
Yeah.
do whatever. And that obviously led to, I'm sure many of our listeners are aware, and many of them aren't aware. It led to us going back and deleting some of our original episodes because they just weren't up to our current standards.
Oh, for sure.
But they were just, just like really choppy Zoom calls and this and that. But a lot of those were also some of our best conversations. Unfortunately, not the best quality, but that's all part of being a common scientist. It's not about being perfect. It's not about having all the answers. It's not about waiting for the perfect moment. It's about going out there and trying it, trial and error, getting the data back. We got some feedback.
Yeah.
We got some feedback. Some people, some people were like, we loved your new episodes, and we went back and listened to your first episodes, and you guys were all over the place. It was fuzzy. It was like you guys were skipping around, like couldn't hear anything, all this stuff, and and we come out better for it. We're still being forged by fire, but we're on our way.
Yeah, absolutely. I think early episodes, just thinking back, and I remember after a couple of episodes, I sent one to my mom. Shouts out to parents and to parental feedback. And she called me and she's like, what in the world was going on? You sweared more than the boys. And I was like, oh man. And then, we've refined and grown and learned. And I think that is the beauty of Common Science. If you stumble upon some of our original content, you're like, whew, just listen to the content now and appreciate how far we've learned and how far we've come, and know that, like, you too, if there's an area in life that you're struggling, you can grow, because we have for sure grown.
Definitely grown.
Definitely grown so much.
And clearly I'm not done growing yet. So it has been a journey so far.
Yeah, totally. I think it was recently that we removed those first few episodes, but going back and listening to them, it was painful. And I apologize to any listeners who did go back and check those out. But at the same time, like you said, just like the process of growing, it can be painful and is painful, and we have come so far as our abilities to speak and write and think and respond in flow.
Yeah, about a year and a half ago, which would have been a little bit before our time, I went to a business startup seminar, and I remember a speaker saying at this business startup seminar, which was kind of ironic, that you could go to 100 of these seminars before you'd actually start a business, and that you could go to 1 million writing workshops before you'd actually be brave enough to send your book out to a publisher or to even sit down and write. And I think coming into Common Science and then meeting these two nerds, we all just had this idea, like, yeah, we're not going to be the people who just go to seminars for a year and plan. We're going to be the people who start and are forged by fire, and we know we're going to learn, and we know it's going to be hard, and we know we're going to grow. But that's what happened, and we're still in the process, and that is also Common Science, right? Like, getting out there and being brave enough to learn, being brave enough to fail, and being okay with that.
Yeah, I think one thing that stands out in what you're saying about our journey and Common Science as a philosophy is just this applying the scientific method to your own life, like this asking of questions. Oh, should I start a podcast? Oh, how do I start a podcast?
Yeah,
I'm going to try it out, receive some feedback from the parents and company, and iterate on it and develop a better understanding. Because, there's been numerous occasions where I've had some idea in my mind and I try it and it goes to crap and I have to revise my schemas. But yeah, I think that idea has been super valuable to me in the podcasting sphere, but then in other aspects of life. What would you guys say to the listeners? What is your concept of Common Science?
I think my concept of common science is absolutely applying the scientific method to my daily life. And for those of you who are unfamiliar, vaguely, loosely, the scientific method is to do some background research, formulate a hypothesis, which is what you think might happen, and then get out there and test it, do some research, some trial and error, and then come up with a bit of a conclusion, and maybe not an answer, but to be able to have said, okay, man, I tested that out, I went through some things, and I figured out that I think this is the answer. And it could be as simple as systematizing what you want to wear every day. It could also be as serious as figuring out your next political view or person that you're going to vote for. Or, I mean, as serious as deciding on a life philosophy like veganism versus something you've been living. And in all of these choices, in all of these moments that we have in life, it's tough to make the decisions at any point in time because of how much information is out there. And what I most appreciate about common science is the willingness to just ask the question, to come to community, talk it out a little, to fail and fail again and fail again, but to learn and grow because of it, and also feel more founded in where I stand on some really important issues, I think, in the world and in life, down to the shoes that I wear when I go out, to crazy scientific topics like string theory. And having just a bit of a foundation makes me feel like a more confident human and woman and common scientist.
Yeah, that was awesome. I wish I didn't have to talk next, but that was really good. I 100% agree. So with me, there's this idea of, so there's a philosopher or a psychologist named Jean Piaget, and he's really renowned in the field of child development. And he has this concept of little scientists. So sometimes people call him like Piaget's little scientist. And it's this idea that there's a scientist in all of us. We're all born curious. We're all born experimenters. We're all born scientists. People who have very little concept of the world, of the environment we're interacting with, but who are constantly testing ourselves, our abilities in the environment, and seeing how it works. Like, so if you go back to like a baby or whatnot, it's like reaching for something and seeing, can I pick this up, right? Does this taste good? Is this edible? All these little things. And of course, over time, like, it takes a few tries and they learn, this is not food. This does not feel comfortable in my mouth. This is not fun to sit on. This is not fun to fall on. All these little things. Whereas as we get a little bit older, obviously those ideas become more complex, but it's still really the same process. Like you said, you have some sort of background information, whether it's like you're doing research or just your life. You have some background information, and you try to hypothesize and test this out to see, is this a true thing in the world? Is this an acceptable way for me to live? Is this a way that's going to get me towards any sort of goals or happiness, success, or whatever your own philosophy is? If that's spreading love, if that's spreading like whatever your battle is, whatever you're trying to do in the world, is the information that I'm operating under, are the beliefs I'm operating under true or conforming to that reality? And I think that the little scientist is a great representation of that. I think it's very, very true. I think a lot of us lose sight of that as we get older, and we start, instead of becoming, being the subjects that we are, the actors that we are, we just become these passive kind of objects where it's just like information is just kind of coming to us, whether it's true or not, and it's sort of guiding our beliefs and therefore guiding our actions. And I think what the importance of common science is to question those beliefs, question that information, ask the big questions, think about them. And then the big hard part is when you find a conclusion that's maybe different, that maybe you didn't want to find, then you change your behavior accordingly.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I mean, the inner scientist in all of us is a beautiful idea, and one of the most true truths I think
True truths.
I've come across.
Truest of truths from the founders of founders.
Is it's just this idea that I mean everybody is born to ask questions and learn about the world and stay curious, and I do think so. I had an interview recently with a librarian, and she talked. It was fascinating to me that she brought up that it's actually one of the hardest times to be a student because there is so much information, which I thought for me was quite humorous because my parents had always told me, oh man, we had to go back and manually search through the catalogs and try to find the right book or whatever. But
Yeah.
they had 10 books to choose from, and we have this, I mean, mass of information at our fingertips, and trying to critically, rather than just consuming it, figuring out how to intentionally narrow it down and find what works and what helps you live a meaningful life. What other aspects? We've touched on a few different areas of life that common science has helped you, Lauren, your heels, your shoes. What other areas have you been thinking harder about through the lens of science?
Well, I first want to comment on what Dre said about Jean Piaget and the little scientist. I have this beautiful image in my mind when I think of that, of just children playing and exploring, and like you said, things in the mouth, and I mean, falling and hurting yourself or taking too much risk or not enough risk. And for me, common science continues to challenge me to have the humility to fail.
Oh yeah.
And to fail publicly, because that is scary. It's super scary. Like the other day, one of the most humiliating moments of every cast, and it's out there for you all to see. I had this concept that where I grew up had just so many lakes. I know both of you guys are gonna roll your eyes, but I had this concept in my mind that, I mean, growing up, that, and this is a minor in comparison to some of the other fails, but I think shows this concept well. I had this idea, guys, that every corner I turned around there was a lake. And so growing up hearing Minnesota, land of 10,000 lakes, I think as a kid I was like, my county has 10,000 lakes. So we record this cast, and that's what I said, on air. And I looked it up, and there are a lot of lakes in my county. There are, but only like in the hundreds. And I mean, just wrong by magnitudes, as Dre so clearly pointed out on the cast, and I felt so embarrassed. But I think that right there, like the willingness to acknowledge a mistake that may have happened in public and to just like be okay with failure is so hard to do, and it's harder and harder and harder the older you get. I think, like, as a child, right, someone's like, you're wrong, and a kid is like, oh crap, I was wrong. And then you continue to get older and older, and it's so much harder, I think. And the more public we get and the more viewers we get, it's a little bit more pressure and a little bit more pressure to be right. And that is not the point of common science, right? The point of common science is to get out, to ask the question, to fail quickly and learn faster. Like, it is not to be the best scientists or like perfect, right? We are common scientists. And Jean Piaget's image is so helpful for me to remind myself, like, I'm not trying to be right. I'm just trying to exemplify learning with humility and being willing to do research, a little research to add value to my life. So yeah, I think wanted to comment on that.
So I also want to say, so Friedrich Nietzsche, I believe his last stage of a human's development is a baby. So I can't remember which stages a person is to go through, but the enlightened state that Friedrich Nietzsche posits is the baby. And so it's just kind of funny to come full circle as a person it seems like if Friedrich Nietzsche had anything right, and Jean Piaget as well, that like the goal is to get to a point where you have humility to admit where you're wrong. And I struggle with it a lot, and I mean I think most people do. Is is admitting that you don't have all the answers, or you don't have like.
And science is really
Yeah.
bad at that. Like the institution that is science, right? Like
Mhm.
is not good at saying like, oh crap, like our masks really doing their job in this global pandemic, or like, oh crap, is the vaccine as efficacious as we hoped? I mean, whatever the question is, science struggles because there is this dance between trust in science, which is not, it is an imperfect practice, and then, I mean, trust in people's ability to continue to do research and find their own truth, I think. And I think what drew me to common science so much and has continued to invigorate my desire to keep doing this is that science should be for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
And there should not be major paywalls. There should not be major gaps. And if my science isn't able to be communicated to a general audience, it is not serving as much of a purpose as it could. And that too has been a huge challenge, and it's been a huge journey, and I hope I continue to get better and better at it. But I think if you do research and you have a finding within the scientific community, right, like at the Mayo Clinics and the U of M's of the world, and you can't create that in a digestible way for the general public, you're maybe not doing your job. And like that's a big claim to make in a world where we live in a publish or perish society. Like it's a huge responsibility. But I think just the tip of the iceberg, right? That's what we're trying to do in a small way for whoever tends to click on our YouTube video or subscribe or whatever. Like that's the hope, is that for each topic, for each piece of research, we can give you just a tidbit of our perspectives. What about you guys? What would you say is like a goal of our podcasts and our YouTube?
I mean, it's definitely to curate, cultivate a community of common scientists, of people who are asking questions, and taking kind of objective. I don't know if it necessarily has to be objective, but kind of putting ideas through the ring of fire, right? Like having a conversation about your beliefs and being able to, like you're saying, being able to say, oh, I was wrong, or oh, I didn't think about that, or oh, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Be able to take like an embarrassment or a feeling of embarrassment and just like being like, yeah, that's okay. Like as long as I'm like, it's better to be leaning towards and failing forward into the truth than it is to like being like holding on to my beliefs. And I think that's kind of what we're trying to do here, is just encourage that line of thinking, encourage those conversations, and eventually, like obviously, like we would really love for all of our audience to grow and engage with us, like be all in our comments, like send us messages, eventually call in and have the conversations with us and show us like and that's what I love so much about us, is that I'm obviously all of us have made fools of ourselves, probably me more than anybody on this show. It's like half the time, like going to your point, like I'm like sometimes I don't even like watching our videos or listening back to our podcasts, because I'm just like, I know I'm gonna sound like an idiot. I know I said something stupid. I know everybody thinks I'm an idiot, but that's perfectly okay. Like you are who you are, and we should all be in this. I don't know if we all should, but I think we all like to be in this constant growth where it's like we're learning more, we're trying to find out more ways to be happy, to have more experiences, to spend more time with our family, and like have these meaningful conversations, meaningful experiences. And I think honestly, the reason why I'm so excited about common science is that I think it's the way to do it. If you go back and look at the Enlightenment period, go back and look at Francis Bacon and the invention of the scientific method, like science has made all of our lives so much better, so much easier, so much freer, so much healthier. And I think that's what I love so much about common science, is taking these huge thinkers and taking their ideas of how, like Piaget said, hey, we're all little scientists. You don't have to be Jean Piaget. You don't have to be Charles Darwin. You don't have to be Nikola Tesla. You can just be you, but you are a common scientist. And this stuff is going to impact you whether you like it or not. Let's all use it, come together, and make all of our lives individually and as a species better, one day at a time.
Yeah, I couldn't say it better. I think what you're talking about each individually having the opportunity to apply some of these ideas to their own lives and then do better. Like if you, I heard, so thinking about our social connections and how each of us knows 1,000 people in a lifetime, and those 1,000 people each know 1,000 people of their own, and so you're 2 steps away from a million. And so just if each individual is living, another truthful truth that I believe in is just this. I just wanted to joke back to that and making a fool of myself in the past on the podcast. And yeah, it's just that if each person was living their best life and figured out through some of these methods how to live a more meaningful life, and they could touch others with that, I think that is a much more powerful force than people could even imagine. Like I think obviously there's these giants, the Nikola Teslas, all these other things. But I think if everybody had that capacity and was able to, obviously there are many, many barriers to that. But I think that applying the scientific method, like you're saying, this is like such a draw to me about the common science idea is just that more people could be capable of that just by asking questions and doing research and communicating as well.
Yeah, and I think too, just a quick point for Lauren, I'd love to hear more of your thoughts on it, but we're all doing it no matter whether we like it or not, no whether we're cognizant of it or not. We're all using the scientific method. We're all experimenting, and we're all asking questions. And a big part about common science is really just doing it with purpose, taking a little bit more time to think about it, and then hopefully we're being forged through that fire and like coming out better, as opposed to denying the science or denying the data that we have, right? We all understand like the person who's madly in love with somebody and all the friends are like, hey, like you're not, that person's not that good for you. And then,
or they're not that into you.
Right. And then you can point to like all these data points that are like, hey, this is a sign that they're not into you. This is a sign they're not good for you. This is a sign. But then you're just so clouded by all these biases, right? Yeah. Whether it's love or whatever it is, background, whatever, you're so clouded that you don't even take into consideration. And of course, 6 months, 1 month, 2 months, a year later, you're like, yeah, of course, like I was wrong. So it's more so just being more cognizant of it. We all have these biases. We're all learning. And I really love that we can, like I've gone back and listened to podcasts where I was vehement about being right. And sometimes I still go back and think I'm right, but I'm listening to it with a different lens, and I can hear Lauren's points, I can hear Aidan's points and whatever, and I'm like, like, if nothing else, you're giving me something to think about. And if nothing, and even if I still think I'm right, it's still helping me kind of sympathize and understand like people who have a much different perspective, and helping me have a better understanding of what the world is like and how we can all work together to get to a better place too.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Lauren, do you have a comment to?
I think we're echoing a lot of similar ideas, right? But I think it shows how much we really do care about this, right? It's not about making it big or like being podcast hosts or whatever. Like we really want to add value to people's lives, and we want to do it by showing what it looks like to have hard conversations, fail, and learn in community. And I think as you guys were talking, the main piece that was just still in my head, or what I was thinking about, was especially the willingness to have tough conversations, because there too, in my adult life, there are areas of controversy where the whole world feels divided. And it's really uncomfortable to talk about those things. And it's even more uncomfortable to talk about those things with our community or my family. And practicing here in the common science community feels like a safe space to do that, so that when I do go home, I can be brave enough to not argue with anyone, but be brave enough to just be true to myself and to be true to what I believe will better my own life, and also to be brave enough to try to hold people I love to that same standard, which is really hard to do. I think it's easier sometimes to allow them to maybe fall into the fake news or whatever, and it's easier not to bring it up because we don't practice these conversations often. And this platform has given me space to practice failure and to practice discomfort, to learn some humility, so that when I go home and have some tough conversations, I feel just a little more comfortable in my own skin and in where I stand and what I hope I stand for.
Yeah. I think the safe space piece stands out to me, and I think that's also partly a reason why we're creating this podcast, is to present what that might look like. And I think finding, if it's not family, it can be friends. If it's not friends, it could be whatever else. Just like trying to find, it could be work community, but trying to find a community where you can test your ideas out without the fear of retribution, I think is so valuable, because then you can test out your ideas, right? You're not scared to and end up staying in your lane. I think to continue on that thread as well is this idea of finding common ground, or at the very least agreeing to disagree, and being able to come to the table with different perspectives and realize that the world is gray. It's not black and white. There's all these different issues. There's many, many complexities to them. We can present a bunch of these complexities or details behind different arguments, right? And at the end of the day, the truth might be in the middle. It might be more towards one end or the other, but just each person needs to take in all the data and test the hypotheses and figure out which helps them to live closer to their ideal or what have you. But
there's a quote that I really like, and I'm going to butcher it. We'll have to link it, but it goes something like this, and maybe you guys can correct me if you're familiar, but it's like, first they came for the gays, and I wasn't gay, so I didn't say anything. And then they came for the black community, and I wasn't black, so I didn't say anything. And then they came for the women, and I wasn't a woman, so I didn't say anything. And then they came for me, and there was no one left to stand up and advocate or help. And I made up the communities that the quote actually says, because those are, I think, all communities that have been in the hot seat in the last couple of years. But that quote, too, I think speaks to me a little bit about what common science should and could mean in the world, in that some of these issues, and they're not all issues, right? Like shoes might not be an issue, but some of the topics that we talk about could add value to have an opinion on, right? Mm-hmm. Like to feel a little comfortable where you stand, and then to also not just feel comfortable where you stand, but to be willing to engage and speak up for one of those conversations. And I hope that too, this community, or at least our practice, can show what that might look like, because I do really think it's important not to be a passive member of society, right? Like I do really think it's important to be someone who's a little informed in order for a voting society, or a society in which we believe that the vote matters, can move forward. And I, like you said earlier, Jay, I think that the way to do that is common science. Mm-hmm. Because, we live in a bit of a dog-eat-dog world, and historically there have been groups of people who've been disenfranchised and oppressed, and the list goes on and on. But if we're going to continue to grow out of that in a way that's equitable, in a way that we are all feeling good about, I think it is important to speak up, so that when the proverbial they, are coming for you, there is a community ready to also stand with you for what feels true. And I hope that that's also what Common Science can help us do as a society, or at the very least at the 20 people who watch this videos, like dinner tables or whatever it is,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's awesome.
Do you have anything to add or respond to?
I guess, obviously all three of us are really passionate about common science, and we're obviously we have some science background, so we understand the value of science to humanity, like humanism, the scientific method, all this data and all this focus on humans as a rational, thinking, experimenting species in the last 500 years or so has changed human life, the individual's life, remarkably.
Mm-hmm.
And even if you go to some egregious specifics, like how Francis Galton and a lot of these eugenicists try to prove that these certain people groups, their lives weren't worth as much, or they have smaller brains, or they have this scientific difference that makes them less human or less important, this and that. And time again, science shows hey, we're all one species. Hey, this is, whether it be just the individual, whether it be us as a community, and even expanding to Mother Earth and the understanding of how plastic is impacting the world and climate change and stuff like that. Science is continually helping us. It's a self-perpetuating thing where it's we invented science, and it's constantly helping us evolve, if not physically, then culturally, and helping us become better. And there's all of that, and I love that, and I think I'm really excited to embrace our greater community as we get more of a community. And feel free to comment, reach out to us, and say, what do you guys want us to talk about? Because at the end of the day, there's science, whatever you're interested in, there's science to it, right?
Yeah.
There's gonna be science to it. So it's not it's kind of like how when I was younger, I thought I didn't like reading. And then I read the series of Unfortunate Events, and then I read Bobby Pendragon, and then I read Percy Jackson. I was oh, I like reading. I just didn't like reading what they were making me read.
Yeah.
And it's it's not that you don't like science. You like science. You are a little scientist. There's science in everything you do. So whatever you're interested in, send us any topic, and we'd love to cover it. We had one of our listeners send us about 4 topics that they wanted us to talk about coming up, and we're going to do at least 2 of those in the next month or so. So really, really exciting. We want to explore, we want to learn, we want to get to know you guys, and we want to talk about what you guys are interested as well. And then on top of that, just going into all that kind of more serious, world change, and people changing, how we can all become together and kumbaya. There's also just science is fun, right? So I was saying, it's science is whatever you're into. If it's into basketball, if you're into sport, video games, there's a science to it. And there's something about science or something about the scientific method, experimentation, that will help you in that. I coach camps. I coach hundreds of kids over the summer. And I have part of our camps as a classroom session where I get to talk with the kids for about 15 to 25 minutes. And I talk to them about all types of scientific ideas, and I try to explain to them certain scientific methodology that will help them become better basketball players, help them understand the trajectory of an arc in basketball shots and how that helps you become a better player, help them understand the ideas of repetition, help them understand free will and advertisements and how things impact, how they have all these signals that are being sent to them and are influencing their physiology and how that might impact them on a basketball court.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And for the most part, they love it. They're I never thought about this, coach. Right? And then it'll be 10 minutes, and they're what does this have to do with basketball? And I'm just wait. And I wrap it all, tie it all in, and they're just oh, and you can see their eyes light up because I've taken something that was abstract and maybe they don't think of themselves as caring about science, and I've brought it to them in a way that they really enjoy and that is digestible for them. And that's obviously what we're trying to do here, and I'm excited about it.
Getting a little teary-eyed. Well, common scientists, I'm thankful for this cast. And I'm thankful for you guys. And I hope that this cast gave you a bit of an idea about who we are, about how passionate we are about common science, about what common science is, what we aspire for it to become in our lives and your lives, and to a little bit more about our desire to bring people in and to remind the world that science is for everyone, and that you too are a common scientist, and that you have an opportunity to engage with a community of common scientists. And we'd love for that to be with us. And if it's not with us too, that's all okay, because it's all common science. And yeah, that's all we're trying to do here is just a bit of common science.
Hey, common scientists. Hope you enjoyed the cast. Thanks for investing in common science. We hope it brought as much value to you as it did to us.
To learn more, smash the subscribe button and visit our website, commonscientists.com, where you can read our blog, join our email newsletter, and follow us on social media.
Finally, if you like what we have to say, you can absolutely support us on Patreon. We could always use more support. You can navigate there also from our website, commonscientists.com, common scientists with an S, so that we can continue cultivating a community of common scientists.